I've invited Diana to say a few words about tonight's guest and the topic.
So our Earth Care Committee,
Can they see you?
our Earth Care Committee, which we talk a lot, here it
There.
is here tonight. And Peggy and I are co-leading the team, and Elsa's here. We have Helen's here. So last year we had Aperture that was introducing our Earth Care, and we had Crystal Dries back from Don't Waste Durham, and she had quite an impact on us. During that presentation, she mentioned your name and the Recollective, but I thought I sounded a little bit familiar, and I realized that our paths have crossed because at the Durham Farmers Market, where she is most Saturdays, there was a table, and she had this canvas bag, which I've brought here on the table, and was trying to tell me about it, and it didn't quite sync. I didn't quite grab it all. But I found out that I also had crossed paths with you at Full Frame Festival because she's led the green team for years, and it's a big production and a very popular group to belong to. Anyway, I finally decided, my husband and I decided to sign up for the Recollective. And the first thing we did was to get that purple bin over there, because the purple bin is where I can put all my compost and take it to the farmer's market on Saturday morning. And her team takes it, and you can tell them what you do with all of it and cleans it all out and gives me a brand new clean one at that time. So I pay to take mine in 2 times a month, or I could take it in 4 times a month, but I chose 2 times a month, which is perfect for us. So my husband and I have started to go little by little, and now I've signed up for the whole Recollective, and I made a poster that I'll have out again on Sunday at the expo that we have. We found out that her whole website is updated. She's now added in things like the fillery, which I didn't, there's the products over on this end over here. The clean, yes. So that's the dish soap that I can use. And there's the box that's the refill. So I don't have to keep buying plastic containers to clean my dishes.
I already do that.
Yay! Do you use fillery?
No.
Or a different one?
Yeah.
There's quite a few out there. I use Blue Land also. So Dawn Wilcox, one of our members here, told me she uses fillery. So she wrote a story. I made a poster in it there, which I'll also have out on Sunday. And she said Emma drives to the fillery and gets their replacements. So anyway, it's kind of fun. Peggy and I want to collect stories from people because that's the way we learn. One of our big stories was yours about the clothesline. And so instead of the dryer all the time. So anyway, we're delighted to have you here. And you can tell us a little more about your personal history too.
Hi guys, thanks for being here today. I'm gonna try and swivel so that I see everybody and also see everyone on the screen at home. I want to just provide a disclaimer. I've had several zero waste fails today, so I have these reusable note cards that I very assiduously wrote out, and they are heat not resistant.
Oh.
And I had them in my back pocket and lost a lot of the notes. So if you'll bear with me, I'm gonna try and do the best I can. And just generally speaking, this talk is for the most part about less technical science-y things, in more about empowering you to look for the science and the education yourself and find ways to meet your waste where you are, is the way that I say it. So I just hope that my perspective is something that you appreciate. It doesn't have to be 100% your perspective. The point of my talk is that everyone is going to come at this in a different way and has different needs and different wants and different lifestyles that produce different kinds of waste. And so I just ask that we all kind of move forward with grace for ourselves and for others. And that's kind of where we're going to go with this. But a little bit about me. I have been managing waste for a long time. I started the recycling program at my high school in Virginia Beach, and I grew up on the Chesapeake Bay doing beach cleanups. So the environment has always been really important to me and something that I have always kind of gravitated towards. And then in coming to Durham, I was also very moved by learning from Crystal. Same thing. I'm sure that she gave a really wonderful speech last year, and I met her at a food truck rodeo at Durham Central Park, and she told me that Durham has no landfill, and it was like this mind-blowing moment for me and kind of moved me into I don't know if it lost the screen share or not.
Might have, maybe because we didn't move it recently.
Maybe I'll see. Sorry, folks. Oh, it says
Oh, we get to see everybody who's out there.
here. I'm just gonna try this really quickly. Thank you for your patience.
Oh, good timing.
Hello?
That's lovely.
Yeah. So, oh, I just disconnected, or I don't know. Share.
Oh, there you
There
are.
you are.
There you are. Down in the lower
That's just
left.
you, that's not your
Okay.
presentation.
Here. Thank you for bearing with me. I know I'm a millennial, but I'm really bad at it.
There you go.
Oh,
No, that's not what she needs,
Yeah, now you've got everybody.
but that's not what she needs, she needs her
She
screen.
needs you. Oh, she needs her slides, of
Yeah.
course.
There we go.
Yay.
Okay. All right, where was I? So I learned that Durham didn't have a landfill and felt really moved to be a part of the movement. I was really inspired by what Crystal told me, and at the same time, Tanya Doutlick at the rodeo was starting a program called Waste Warriors that had folks standing at every trash station, sorting trash and making sure that the right things went in the compost and the right things went in the recycling. And I just thought that that was one of the coolest things I had ever seen. And I was doing that for the park and continuing that program once Tanya had handed it off, and Keep Durham Beautiful was able to donate a lot of supplies and tools for us to keep that program going. And through that, I kind of learned that I really enjoyed doing events and helping people have fun without having a huge impact on the earth. And events were kind of my bread and butter for a really long time until COVID happened and there were no events to manage waste for. And so I pivoted and kind of moved into the commercial space and actually approached Fillory, the owner of Fillory, Alyssa. And I had just been a fan of her soap for a really long time. She does refillable soap, so you have no waste when you buy soap from her, because you can take a mason jar and just fill it up right at the store. And I thought that was so cool, and I asked her, what would it be like if your back of house were also zero waste? You know, you're helping all of these people in the front of the house, but I'm sure that you're getting shipments in of bubble wrap so that the glass doesn't break and that kind of thing. And it was a little less polished than that. It was probably more like, hey, can I take your trash? I don't really know what to do with it, but I'll figure something out. And I just kind of went on from there, doing more events, and I did Moog Fest. And Full Frame was actually a one-off, but the music festival, Moog Fest, which was held, it's an electronic music festival that was held in downtown Durham, was we went from the first year I did it, I had no idea what I was doing. We had 36 cans of trash for the 4 largest venues. And then the second year I did it in 2017, we only had 6 cans of trash. So that there's a huge difference there, and I learned a lot. And I really feel like I have just kind of grown through that. And then the Recollective came about through just meeting a partner of mine, Kevin Young, who is the co-founder of the Recollective. He really wanted to bring what I was doing for businesses to residential. So there are certain things curbside that you just can't recycle in your blue bin. And the city does offer solutions for it, but you have to drive them here and there and everywhere. And so we wanted to offer that opportunity for someone to have a door-to-door recycling service that worked for styrofoam, light bulbs, batteries, and other materials that are either hard to recycle or not recyclable, but they're like a really cool box, you know, that you just don't want to throw in the
Yeah.
trash. And so we came together and started the Recollective. So I'll mention the Recollective throughout this kind of shameless plugging and self-promotion. But also I encourage you to look into your own options if DIY is the option that makes sense for you, if taking your stuff fills you with a great joy. I personally am not a person that I would market the Recollective to because I am constantly taking my stuff here and there. So I just, again, want to say that this is about meeting yourself where you are and doing what you can and what you want to have the biggest impact that feels the best and having a major collective impact as well. So with that, I'll just get started. There's a few things I'll talk about tonight. Again, I'm not going to get very technical. I'm happy to answer recycling questions at the end. But if you have really you know, intense recycling questions, the best thing to do is to go to your city's or county's website. So I don't know if everyone here is from Durham, but the Durham County, Wake County, and Chatham County all have really excellent waste wizards that you can plug in any material into and learn what to do with it. And I'm always happy to also answer those questions. So if you want to email me or ask me after, hey, I have, you know, 500 rubber ducks, what can I do with them? I love those questions. They're my favorite trash questions. But I will talk at the beginning a little bit about the stakes. I think that we kind of all have to start from a similar place of, I try to avoid the doom and gloom, but I do think it's important for everyone to know why we do what we do and why we should be thinking about our trash in a more mindful way and in a more holistic sense. And so there is a little bit about that and what to do about it. And then also just kind of going into the idea of like the psychology of sustainable behavior and what motivates us to be sustainable and how we can motivate other people to be more sustainable, and also how we can kind of accept where other people are might not be where we are, and understand that if we're looking at this holistically, we need to look at this with an equitable lens as well as a sustainable lens. And that means, again, I'm just going to keep this is going to be a broken record tonight, understanding that people aren't going to be at the same levels. They're going to be different barriers for different people, different classes, different races, different accessibility. And so just trying to keep that in mind. And affecting the collective action in a positive way when we kind of lose our hold on like everyone should have their reusable coffee mug when they go into the thing, you know, into the coffee shop. Today I was running late and I left my lunch on my kitchen counter and I bought a cheeseburger in a styrofoam container.
Say it's not so.
And sometimes that's the day you have. So yeah, that's kind of the theme of this is grace, and just grace for yourself and others and the earth. I'm going to do my acknowledgements first because I feel like by the end you'll be kind of glazed over. So I just want to say I mentioned Crystal and Muriel and Tanya at the outset from Don't Waste Durham and Keep Durham Beautiful, and Muriel is a city of Durham employee. They are, you know, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I have always been interested in this work, but I would not be able to do the work that I do without the people that came before me and that are doing the work with me and concurrently and doing very different work. And there are also organizations like Circular Triangle and Bull City Boomerang Bag that I just feel like, you know, there's no competition in an industry where there are infinite problems. So I just am really grateful to these people for being inspirations to me and to others. And I just want to acknowledge them. And also my co-founder, Kevin, who's not here tonight, he really opened my eyes to see that this is something that we could bring to residential customers I really thought the thought of scaling up a recycling service that had really specific types of recycling for really specific types of materials was frightening to me. I did commercial for so long, and it was so fun to go to all of these different businesses and say, hey, can I take your trash? And what have you got? And the business owner would say, well, someone just threw a frying pan in my garden bed. This literally happened. And they're like, and it's super rusty. Can you take a rusty frying pan? And those kinds of interactions were really fun. You can't do that with 1,000 residences. And so Kevin was really innovative and thoughtful about the canvas bags and how the Recollective would be able to scale to work for a lot of people. And it's really worked well. We had 40 members in 2022 when we started, September of 2022. I was driving the van and sorting everything in a storage unit without water or electricity in the heat of July. And now we have 3 employees and a warehouse in right across the street from Podysaurus, and we're almost to 450 members. So we are not even 2 years fully into business. So I'm very happy with that, and I just want to acknowledge Kevin for that. And then last but not least, I would be very remiss if I didn't acknowledge my husband, who, when I came home and said, I just want to take people's trash for a living, and I need your car to do it because I don't have one. He was like, okay. So for the largest part of my business, when I had just started, I was literally collecting like mounds of bubble wrap and strapping them to the, like literally 700 yards of bubble wrap and strapping it to the top of his Toyota Camry. So I just want to shout Barrett out for that.
Wow.
So let's get into it. Again, Diana was just saying that Crystal came and did a great talk about the Sampson County landfill and the stakes of what the state of waste is in Durham and in the world. And I'm just going to kind of reiterate these things. There was a really wonderful situational analysis that Katie did, and I don't know if we can move the folks. Yeah.
There.
Okay. So Katie Hunt at the City of Durham was a Fuse Fellow, and in 2023 did a situational analysis. And this information is all on the City of Durham's website. It's very fascinating. And she was looking at how we could possibly do more reuse in the city. And one of the things that she started with was what we're landfilling, what we're recycling. And I had already known this about the Sampson County landfill, but one of the numbers that was very staggering to me that I saw was about the amount of fuel that's used when we send these semi trucks of trash every day to the Sampson County landfill. So it was about 160,000 gallons of diesel fuel every day. And that's over 8,000 trips to this landfill. So, it kind of gives you an idea of the scale of the amount, but also just like the impact that it has. We're not just talking about stuff and its effect. We're talking about like carbon emissions and land values in a place that is majority poor and majority Black, and where the median income is $45,000 a year. We have all of these reasons to want to lessen what we're sending to the Sampson County landfill. The methane that's produced from landfills alone, the effects that research has been shown to babies who are born within a mile of a landfill are 12% more likely to have congenital malformations. There are just so many reasons. They have done studies on birds that have fed from landfills, and those birds' droppings then go to nearby fields and farms and affect our food sources. And so, again, these conversations and these problems that we're talking about are not happening in a vacuum. It's not just, here's a mound of stuff. It's, here's a mound of stuff that is now affecting food deserts. And when we're talking about redlining and the value of a Black neighborhood versus a white neighborhood, if that's near a landfill, you know, these property values, there's less money going into those school systems. I mean, these things are all really interconnected. And so it's just a lot to think about, and it can feel really overwhelming. On a smaller scale, we're looking at our own personal trash, right? And how we get to that huge number of 8,000 trips to the Sampson County landfill a day. We do that because the average American wastes about 4.9 pounds of trash every single day.
Wow.
And I don't know, if you guys have a water bottle, I feel like my special magic trick nowadays is that I can like hold something in my hand and be like, that's about 15 pounds. Because I didn't have a scale for a really long time. So a lot of my measurements for estimating weight and diversion was through the EPA's volume to weight conversion. So I'm like, okay, this is what kind of material, it's about the yay high, you know, it's gonna be this much. But if you know, any kind of thing in front of you, your phone, that seems like a really compact amount of trash. And again, there's going to be a lot of ways I encourage you to think about trash in different ways. We like to make our trash as small as possible. One of the things at the food truck rodeo that I advise volunteers on is that whenever you get a clamshell or a bag of food and someone's like, you know, I don't have time, you sort it, and they hand it to you, you're gonna have a bag inside of a box, inside of a bag, inside of a box, and in the very center is gonna be a plastic utensil. So you always have to pull it out, and it always ends up being so much more voluminous once you've pulled everything apart. And it's because I think we have a hard time looking at what that 4.9 pounds really amounts to. And in terms of commercial waste too, when we're talking about volumes versus weights, you know, 4 pounds of styrofoam is different from 4 pounds of cardboard. And so we have these different values that we place and impacts that we place on certain things. Styrofoam is mostly air, but it has an incredibly negative effect on the environment. And cardboard is one of the worst things to move, especially because it's so unwieldy and heavy, but it is very, very recyclable. It's a good market. And so there's a lot to consider when we think about that 4.9 pounds. And especially when we think about the challenges that we have to reduce that amount, and our only option is recycling. So obviously the Recollective is a recycling company. I encourage and champion recycling on some scale. I don't think it's foolproof. I don't think anything is foolproof or 100% the best. You know, if you look at, I think it's a really interesting thing when we, again, are taking everything as a whole and we're talking about problems with any municipal service, right? The roads or schools or traffic light, you know, like all kinds of things that the government provides to us. For some reason, it really sticks in people's craw that recycling has flaws. And it's really interesting to me that that's one thing that people really can't handle there being flaws with. Like it has to be perfect or it's unacceptable. I'm not saying that I think where we are is good by any stretch, but I think that there are a lot of strides we're making to be able to do what we can with the economy that we've been given. And this is a lot that we've also learned from Crystal and the people at Don't Waste Durham, is that we don't live in a circular economy. We live in a linear economy. And that means that stuff is built and made to be thrown away. And so when we get to the end of something's life, we feel the pressure on ourselves personally when it doesn't have to be that way. It could be something we kind of all take as an opportunity to have more public awareness, to put the pressure where it should be, which is corporations. And the systemic problem of trash is really something that I think we have an opportunity as a collective to say, we can talk through these problems together and take these problems to corporations and say, you can do better than this. And I think that we'll talk more about this later on, but I think that we really kind of have an American exceptionalist view of recycling. And it happens in like schools. I think most is like the starkest contrast, where in Eastern countries, people as a collective, we kind of want everyone to be doing well. There's the phrase like the squeaky wheel gets the grease in America, and then in Eastern Asian countries, I think the phrase is the rusty nail gets the hammer. So, you know, we put a lot more attention on the personal individual problems, when I think we all in this room could do a lot together to be more instrumental in shaping corporate behavior and affecting more positive change. One of the really interesting things about the plastic problem in America, I look at old ads from the 70s, and there's that Keep America Beautiful ad where the water bottle is rolling down the street and it eventually hits the foot of a Native American indigenous man, and he sees the water bottle and a tear tracks down his cheek, and it's like, you made him cry. But it's not really your fault. It's the people who made the water bottle, in my opinion. So I think we have a lot of opportunities to foster more accountability. Man, these note cards I made up are so yeah, so I think we should be more discerning about the focus being on consumer responsibility is a little bit devious on the part of major corporations. Recycling is still a waste stream, and so we still need to be more aware of our individual behaviors. But I think we use our individual behaviors as this is what's going to make or break climate change, when it should be, this is what's going to make or break my part in influencing the tide towards holding corporations responsible and making real changes in that respect. This is from Break Free from Plastic. They did a brand audit in 2023, which I think is really fascinating. They took what the total count is, how many types of plastic materials. So if it's a Dasani bottle versus an Aquafina bottle, that kind of thing, in how many countries, what the most common type of item it was, and the brand. And so Coca-Cola, of course, hits the top of the charts every time, with 33 different thousand types of plastic that they're producing in 40 different countries. So when you think about your 4.9 pounds, this isn't a way to absolve you of your responsibility, but it's a way to say, if you focus on your 4 pounds and keep at that, maybe start expanding where else that influence reaches and who else we can get to kind of get on board. We can affect supply chains. We start by patronizing places like Fillery, and then Dawn Dish Soap has to think more about what the consumer wants. I went to a sustainable business conference at Duke a few years ago, and it was fascinating. And I think there is a place for big business trying to learn how to practice sustainability in a responsible way that's not greenwashing. In other words, trying to look green without actually being green. And one of the keynote speakers was a sustainability officer from Coca-Cola. And she said, I will never forget this. She was on stage and she was like, we did a survey and we interviewed millennials, and these people in their generation will walk away from a brand if it doesn't align with their values. And everyone in the audience was like, and it was like everyone, these major corporations were like, oh no, these people would buy something else if it didn't align with their values, if it wasn't offering recycled plastic or doing the right thing. They might not buy your Coca-Cola. And the woman was horrified. And I just thought that was so interesting. It's like, wow, that's not a bad thing. So, systemically, the burden that corporations place on the earth just, far outweigh what we're doing, and yet they're scared of us. They're scared that we might impact their bottom line, and so, it kind of is interesting. It makes me feel powerful and at the same time a little bit helpless. And that kind of dichotomy, I think, happens with all kinds of social change. I want to mention a couple of other industries that are, they're tangential to the plastic industry, but also something to think about. They're not exactly something we feel we might be able to affect consumer wise, but are also something that just to be on our radar. The fishing industry is a major producer of ocean plastic, and the military is a huge emitter of carbon emissions. And whatever we feel about these brands or these companies or these industries, we can ask more from the world and these major players. And so I just want to mention that. And this break free from plastic brand audit is a really interesting window, and it has a lot more information on it. And all of these kind of infographics will be linked in the back of the presentation. So it kind of gives you an eye of the stakes, and just moving into like, okay, so what should we do? You're asking me to recycle, but don't care too much. Worry about yourself, worry about corporations, don't worry at all. It does feel like I'm kind of flip-flopping, and I want to say I think about this a lot, and I do go back and forth and think, again, it kind of depends on the day, and depends on you, and depends on where you are and who you are and what season of life you're in. So I think the question isn't what do we do, it's how do we think about these things, and what questions are we asking ourselves. So obviously, the gateway, kind of reducing your waste infographic is this one. So you start with reduce and reuse, and then you move on to recycling and composting, whatever you can't reduce and reuse. And then you try energy recovery, is a fancy word for burning your waste. And then you try to, convert the energy. And then we're talking about the very end, that smallest triangle is landfill. So when we talk about reducing and reusing as the priority, that is obviously like the number one, but sometimes it's not so obvious. And sometimes, excuse me, we don't really think about, we see these like Facebook posts and things like that, where it's like, reuse your tongue scraper. I've never used a tongue scraper in my life, and I'm like, this is not relatable at all for me. And I feel like, we're not looking at this hierarchy in the context of our own lives. And I think one of the really most important things is that we get a lot of this information through the lens of a consumer mindset. And one of my favorite things to do, and I swear it's like clockwork, the next time you get to January or the end of the year, look at all of the New Year posts, the green resolutions, 15 ways to reduce your plastic consumption. And 1 through 12 is buy this thing and it'll help. And 1 through 15 should be use what you have, use it up, use it until it's gone, try to repair it once it's gone. When it's gone, go and ask the neighbor if you can borrow theirs so that you don't have to buy a new one. Go on your share websites, your swapping groups, and try your hardest not to buy the new thing. Because you don't need a new thing to make yourselves green. I think about this all the time. I grew up with my papa, who was a child of the Great Depression, and he saved every rubber band and everything. And when I went back to school, I went back to school and all of his rubber bands, and he worked for National Car Rental, and he found pens in every car that he cleaned out whenever he moved a car from here to there. And all of my pens throughout high school were all pens from rental cars. And I never had to go to Office Depot once. And it was great. And we are really fortunate to have places like the Scrap Exchange and groups like Bull City Shares, where you can go online, and these buy nothing groups. People want to give you stuff. They want to help you. They want to unburden themselves and in the process. So a lot of times when we think about reuse, we think about it being the end of the life of the thing that you're holding in your hand. But I really like that, thinking about the fact that it's the beginning of the life for someone else when it gets reused. You know, so we finally come to recycling, which again, I don't have a lot of hard answers for you about recycling. I definitely encourage you to look at your municipalities, but my best bets are bottles, cans, tubs, jugs, and jars. I just kind of say that like a Rain Man kind of thing. I also look at different materials like cardboard, aluminum, glass, and thinking in terms of those special materials that are the best bets, and then the best bets being shapes for plastics. Cups, anything where the opening is wider than the base is not recyclable in Durham. So a lot of people don't know that Solo cups, even though they have the recycling symbol on them, are not recyclable in Durham. So there are a lot of kind of tips and tricks, but for the most part, I just stick to that: bottles, cans, tubs, jugs, and jars. And a big rule of mine is that I would so much rather see recycling in the trash than trash in the recycling. So just in terms of personal habits, that's what I try to keep in mind. But again, you know, this is very personal, and if you don't have bottles, cans, tubs, jugs, and jars, and you're generating a different kind of waste, you should ask yourself different questions. If you're in a different era of your life and don't have an opportunity to recycle the way you used to, that's something to think about. I have a father-in-law at home who moved in with us in July and has Alzheimer's, and there's no getting him to remember to put his banana peels in the compost. And we don't do it anymore because the bucket is just too confusing, and that's okay. And that's gonna be okay for as long as it has to be for our family. Parents, you know, I against my will, sometimes it feels like, read these mom groups on Facebook where it's like cloth diapers versus not cloth diapers and all of these things. And it's like, I would never presume to know what someone's situation is. And so when you're thinking about your waste and you have these hard rules like the ones on the previous page, bottles, cans, tubs, jugs, and jars, but you're not thinking about like your junk drawer and like what you particularly produce. Are you a vegan, so you don't have to worry about meat and bones and dairy when you're composting your food? Or are you a new parent and you don't have the brain cells to sort your trash? You know, are you a biker versus a car driver? And so you might not have to buy gas, but now you have rubber tires to think about. There are just a lot of different people in the world, and I think we kind of forget that. I think we really think about black and white and we say recycling was broken, the only thing to do is reuse, the only thing to do is recycle, the only, we put all these pressures on ourselves and others, and we kind of end up setting ourselves back, and having less of an impact where, I love it when I go to a party and people find out what I do, like they immediately are like, I threw this thing away today. Like they just have to like confess their shame. And I feel like that's like a cultural thing that we've put on ourselves. Like it shouldn't be like that. We shouldn't feel that way about the trash we produce. We should be thinking about it very intently. We should take it very seriously. But the way that we kind of shame other people, or hold other people to our different standards, I'm reminded of that, like is it the Einstein test where there's a fish and a giraffe and a monkey, and the test is climb that tree, and we're expecting them all to be able to climb the tree. And I think it's just kind of the test doesn't really meet everyone where they are. And so that brings me to kind of a more in-depth look at the psychology of sustainability and how sustainable behaviors, kind of how we influence ourselves and others to be more sustainable without the shame and guilt and weirdness that comes with, and I think like pride too. Like I think when people are like, oh, I have a mason jar of trash and that's all the trash I've produced in an entire year. It's like, well, that's a little weird. How'd you do that? That's all you did that year. That's literally all you spent your time doing. I mean, it's amazing, but whoa. And so, yeah, I think if we think about, these ideas, we should just keep in mind that all behavior is situational. So one of the first tenets of the psychology of sustainability is just the idea that we have behavioral affordances, is a nice way of saying some people have a lot and some people have a little, and some people have behavioral boundaries that keep them from being able to behave in the same way that you do. And so just realizing that like our intentions might be totally different. There might be someone who was the most zero waste person in the world, but they still have to get across 3 bus lines, and they don't have the extra, whatever bag, 10-cent bag fee or something like that to, take their groceries. And so they have to take it in a plastic bag and they can't walk it to, to their home, and they live outside of a food desert, and, all of these different contexts for reasons why waste is produced. There's also this idea that one solution fits all. I mentioned the tree test. I think of compost as like a really good example of this because I love the bucket. It's like when I moved to Durham, I lived in a house with like, felt like 500 people. It was probably 4. And we were getting everyone to compost. It was really great. You just put it out on your doorstep. And I remember thinking, this is the easiest way to compost. And then I started trying to sell buckets like that to people, and just learning how many different people were like, no, like I have arthritis, and the idea of putting a bucket out is like just the worst thing in the world for me. So I have one of those little countertop things that turns it into, useless dirt, and it's like, that's great for you, we think about, like, again, I mentioned vegans versus meat packers. Some people really prefer backyard compost and some people have pets. There are just so many different situations that might motivate someone to compost or not compost. Maybe someone's really intensely sensitive to smell or something like that. I think a lot about like, excuse me. I think we assume that if something really works for us, that it's gotta be easy for everyone, and when we do that, the pressure to like fit in is kind of there, and I think we get out of school and we feel like we're in the adult world and that societal pressures or social pressures don't exist anymore, and that we don't succumb to them, and that's just not true. People, young and old, are all susceptible to feeling that kind of pressure or feeling like they have to fit in, and so I really just hate the idea that someone feels like they're just being left out, or that they're different for not being able to participate in the same way. And I think, we're expecting the same of everyone. And I feel like I'm right now, like at this point, kind of just listing off excuses why people can't be sustainable. And I swear I'm not doing that purposefully. I'm trying to bring up real life examples and reasons I've heard from people I've met for why things, the like commercially perfect green behavior is not necessarily always the best solution, and how in this room, we all kind of have to fit our own mold and make our own mold. And together that has the greater impact than if we try to make everyone bringing their reusable bags. And, we haven't even gotten to the equity question, which is what this kind of addresses really quickly, but there are societal barriers, geographical barriers. I mentioned the bus, psychological barriers. I have a friend who has to wear gloves when they do dishes, and they're like, I hate it. I'm so sorry. It's just a part, that's my trash. I'm just gonna have rubber gloves that I have to throw away, and there's nothing. And she tried and it just didn't work. And so, again, I'm not trying to make excuses, but I'm trying to kind of illustrate the fact that there are just so many different ways to be in the world, that if we all kind of figure out the best version of our sustainable plan, that makes sense. And again, with the Recollective, it's the same thing. I don't think that system works for everybody. There are people who are incredibly zero waste who have that mason jar of trash, for which the Recollective wouldn't make sense. And so, we have on our website all of these options for how to drop off trash. If the only thing you're producing out of the list of materials that we take is styrofoam, you can take your styrofoam somewhere. And so you can look that up on our website, or again, email me about your rubber ducks. Again, just another example of like different ways in which we all have differing perspectives, and from each according, what is the phrase? From all of our different abilities, we can approach different problems. And so there are just so many different ways that we can act. And I'm going to list a few here, but there's civic action, so voting and petitioning, obviously. There's educational action, doing your own research, reading. I had a giant stack of books that I left in my office. So I'll be happy to, don't have them listed on here, but I'll add them to the program. But highly recommend Garbology. It's one of my favorite waste books. Financial action, donating. I like to ask people, like, do you want to spend time or do you want to spend money? Because you can kind of see there are different lifestyles that have those different abilities. There's legal action, there's persuasive action like letter writing and advocacy. And then there's at the bottom of that list, I would say, is the direct behaviors that we think about when we think about your purchasing, stopping behaviors, substituting behaviors, and making behaviors more efficient. All of those things are like direct actions that I would call. So there are just so many different forms and ways to make changes. And then lastly, is policy change. And I think this is kind of the most important one and is kind of lead into why we can have a greater impact collectively, is policy is the vehicle for us to have better individual behaviors. Again, we were talking about behavioral affordances. If we made it easier for everyone to recycle, then we would have better opportunities for people to make individual choices. That doesn't happen in a vacuum. So, it takes individuals to make the policy change. It becomes kind of a chicken and an egg situation. I like to call it the straw in the door, because I think about when the straw bans came out, was one of the most fascinating periods of social change and pressures. The straw ban was really polarizing. So there was one camp that was like, you're evil if you use a straw. And then there was another camp that was like, you're evil if you expect everyone not to use a straw, because there are some people who need straws. And who are you to decide who needs a straw and who doesn't? And then some people were like, well, it's, they can have it on offer, but you just don't need to hand out straws to everybody. And it went back and forth and back and forth. And it was just this really fascinating community conversation that everyone was having. And it felt like, we're kind of missing the nuance here of, if you can not use the straw, don't use the straw, and let that motivate you to feel good about your actions, to snowball into other ways to be mindful about your waste. And the people who need the straw obviously should be drinking with the straw and not worry about what anyone thinks. But we had this kind of, everyone has to be on one side or the other. And I just was really like, I wonder why people feel like they have to be in one camp or the other, when it really just seems like if you need a straw, you should use a straw. And if you feel like not having a straw makes you feel really good about your actions, it can motivate you to be better. And then, and I do have friends who said when the straw ban happened, I would, no, thank you, I don't need a straw. And it made me think about, oh, no, thank you, I don't need a reusable bag. And then it made me think about, oh, hey, you guys shouldn't have styrofoam. And they affected the local supply chains at their restaurants. And that turned it was a foot in the door to get someone to go from literally never considering their waste in their life to refusing a straw to asking their restaurants to buy better materials. And so, it's kind of like, let's do what we can and mind our own business and let other people do the same, because, the people who need straws, it was an accessibility issue. And so it brings about the conversation of equity versus sustainability. My sister is a single mom with 5 kids, and I would never expect her or hold her to the same standards of remembering her reusable bags after 4 soccer practices and a long day of work, in the same way that I would expect myself to know what I'm doing. And so we can't really hold people to the same standards. There's a phrase that I've heard before. It's like all people have the same 24 hours in a day. And I think about that person on the bus line. It's like, no, we don't. If you have a car, 20 minutes to you is a really quick jaunt across Durham, whereas 20 minutes to this other person is sitting at the bus stop and not getting the things done that they need to do in their lives. So we really have to kind of keep those things in mind. And when I say, we're trying to learn how to encourage other people, and a rising tide lifts all boats kind of collective action, the name of the game is encouragement and not shame, and not assuming we know anything about another person's circumstances. I think about how costly it is to be poor. when COVID happened and the toilet paper shortages were going on, I went to Not Just Paper, and I was so blown away because Not Just Paper, secret tip, has paper wrapped toilet paper for Costco pricing. So, they don't have, I mean, Costco, you can get Costco, well, this was a long time ago now, but, it was like 50 cents a roll, right? But it was all plastic at Costco, and you could get that at Not Just Paper, but you had to buy 96 rolls.
Oh.
So it's 50 cents a roll that you spent a big chunk of change right off the top. And so, a couple of friends of mine got together and were like, hey, you know, $10, $10. We passed out all this toilet paper. I could have had a really good racket going. I don't know how I got into recycling, but, so yeah, so just a consideration of like bulk buying is a really great example of, you know, the cost of being poor, or, you know, I was thinking about tickets, parking, and, you know, having like this inability to pay a parking ticket turns into having a boot on your car, turns into this huge, you know, like, you know, could turn into a license suspending, could turn into you not being able to get to work because you can't drive. And, you know, these problems just kind of snowball. And so, again, when we're thinking about how interconnected everything is, we really need to kind of face our own prejudices and assumptions about what everyone can be doing at the same time. There's this quote by Martin Luther King, which I think is, kind of what I'm getting at here, which is that, the solution of one problem brings us to face with another problem. So, we feel good, and then we kind of like, oh, there's a lot that feels like we have to solve. And I think, again, we're just repeating the refrain from the beginning of this, that we should have grace for ourselves and others, and be able to, just kind of, come together on the fact that we're all feeling enthusiastic about our behaviors and meeting ourselves where we are. So there are a couple of reasons and ways, that other people, make sustainable choices. And I would say, you know, we do it for others, we do it for ourselves. And then we kind of move from the internal to the external. So it feels good, like I was saying about the straw, you want to do the right thing, that kind of snowballs. You see the effects that it has on a community, or that a neighbor, or that someone, you know, you're able to pass on, a TV on a swap site or something like that, and you see it not go into the landfill, but go into the hands of someone who would otherwise not be able to buy it, or would be buying a new TV and new plastic. You kind of move from that. And so I would just say, you know, we start with these small little actions, and then we kind of consider our community and think about, what affinity groups you're a part of. Westminster is one of them. This is a great place to kind of get and encourage other people to be a part of what you're doing. And then, you know, but there's also your tennis club and your dog walker's friend, and your, you know, there are so many different groups that you're a part of, and just thinking about those communities and those ways in which you're connected to the world. Kind of, there are so many different ways to kind of tap into and promote sustainability. I think about internal and external, changes, and how in business we have like, the employees or the members of a group that we're a part of, like Westminster, but then also the consumer or the customer, too. So Fillory is doing both, and I think they're a really great example of one person making a change for a bigger community. And so they help their customers lower their waste, But they also do it in the back of house, and so they've helped their employees learn more about low waste living. And so if we think about these affinity groups and the inside and outside of those, the internal and external work that those groups are doing, there's a version of that for every group, and a different style again that works for every group. And I'm just gonna leave you guys with this quote. One of the books that I don't have here today. It's called Climate: A New Story, and it's just about kind of having a more positive, invigorated, feeling about making these changes. We can be peaceful in our fervor and patient in our urgency. And I hope that you feel encouraged and, peaceful and patient into your fervor and urgency. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
I have a comment and a question unrelated. The comment is unfortunately the Ocean City
Ocean
government,
City, Maryland.
Maryland,
Mhm.
has eliminated recycling.
Wow. I
They
hadn't
put
heard that.
everything in the garbage,
Wow.
Wow.
and I don't know what the policy decision is, but they obviously, it must have been some kind of trade-off, that it was more efficient to do that. So I'm not trying to put a damper on.
Oh,
what you-
yeah.
But-
No, I think it's happening in a lot of places, and again, it depends on the type of material. Some glass recycling in North Carolina has stopped. There's so much, that's why we look at things holistically, right? Because Ocean City, I'm sure, still has to do the beach cleanups. There's still people with coronas on the water that,
Yeah.
they gotta do something, and, it's tough.
And my question is,
Sure.
right here, I would expect to see an M at the bottom.
No, it is recollective.co. Yes, that's not a typo.
Well, most of the residents here in Durham, I think, have the blue recyclable bins. Who separates what we put in there wrong when the
Aha,
city picks up?
good question.
Right, yeah, so,
Who's in charge of that? Because we make mistakes of what is recyclable and what's not. Next question, how do we really find out what is recycled? Because there's so many misnomers out there.
yeah,
Two questions for you.
yeah, so, that as far as I'm aware, that the city takes their recycling to a transfer station and spreads it out on the floor. I always like to ask this question, like, what do you think, when do you recycle a material? Is it when you throw it in your bin? Is it when you take it outside? Is it when the city picks it up? Is it when the city takes it to Sunoco, which is where it goes in Durham? It depends on the city that you're in. But Sunoco is our final, or not our final destination, but the destination where it gets, taken on conveyor belts and sorted
It's
through.
something like that.
Contamination is a huge issue in all recycling. This is why, they don't allow styrofoam and light bulbs and batteries and all the things that.
But some styrofoam has that famous little triangle on it.
So the triangle is only to designate what type of plastic it is. That was a design actually by, it was a container organization, that they made corrugated cardboard boxes in 1970, and they had a design for it's kind of like when you see a juice that says all natural, it literally means nothing. And so yeah, a 23-year-old designed that in 1970 and won this design contest, and it became this huge poster design. And it really is only to designate what type of plastic it is. So 1, 2, 3, that kind of thing. But it can mean anything from, this was made from recyclable materials. This can be recyclable in some, select cities and counties. It might be that it's recyclable where it was made, does recycling for that thing, but it gets shipped across the country. And so when it's a California material that gets shipped to North Carolina, it's no longer that kind of recyclable. And so I would not use that symbol to mean anything other than this is trash. And it might have a number in it that might tell you if it's
Then
low
how do we
density.
make- Then how do we make our decisions of what is recyclable and what is garbage?
I
Absolutely.
kind of let the recycling people make that decision for me. If I don't know for sure, I leave it in there and let somebody else decide.
Yeah,
But I
so,
never recycle styrofoam.
no,
Mhm.
and styrofoam is never, polystyrene is not recyclable in Durham. So when I shared this, I'll go back to, let's see. Sorry, these are, okay, yeah. These are what I would say are your best bets. Bottles, cans, tubs, jugs, and jars are the shapes that plastic I feel pretty confident in telling you to put in your blue bin.
What paper material?
And paper is an interesting one for me because if you go to the city of Durham's like Waste Wizard, it'll say, I'm answering your question kind of with a question of my own. So this is something that is, it's an interesting question. On the Waste Wizard website of the city of Durham, it says unsoiled paper can be put in your blue bin. That's assuming that everyone is using this process perfectly, right? And that there's no soilage, there's no, everyone's washing their bottles and drying them out. And then there's no liquids happening in the giant recycling truck. So when you put the cardboard or the paper in your blue bin, it probably is unsoiled, but is it getting to the facility unsoiled in the condition that they're asking for it? And so I take my cardboard to the transfer station, and they have a giant, very scary crusher that I put the stuff in, and that I feel good about.
Using a lot of fuel up to get to the transfer station.
Yeah, so there is a big question about that, and that's one of the reasons why I think the Recollective isn't effective. We don't take cardboard, but for the materials that we do, we've looked at a comparison of what carbon emissions you spend taking your batteries and light bulbs here and taking your styrofoam here and doing this versus having the Recollective's route, which is going throughout the entire city and picking up from everyone we save. You know, we're on average in our densest areas in Durham, about 1.5 miles between houses on average. And so it's more efficient. But yeah.
Could you tell a couple of stories about what you do with the stuff that you collect? Like who you find to use it?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So when I'm gonna stand up again, I just want to sit for a second. When I started, I really went on social media websites, the Chamber of Commerce, and I started just messaging, like cold calling businesses and just saying like, hey, would you ever want some used bubble wrap? And talking to jewelers and artists and teachers and finding people that would use it. So our priority is creative reuse, like what the Scrap Exchange does, and finding different you know, like I said, nonprofits and other partners downstream to take this stuff. Bubble wrap is a really good one because I get it from Fillery and Part and Parcels, another business that I take waste from, and they get a lot of shipments in of glass, and so they get a lot of bubble wrap in, and then I help other businesses with their bottom line because they don't have to spend money with Uline on virgin plastic. They get bubble wrap from me and are able to use it and prevent the new plastic from being purchased. We take things like wine corks and give them to artists who make wine cork tables and shelves and things like that. We're doing this coming month, we're doing plant pots and tools for the Durham Tool Library. So people will just be able to use tools. And then also the plant pots, we have we're giving them for free to the really, really free market, and then the plastic pots that are a little less nice and people probably won't want will be recycled with Verity Recycling in Ashboro. So there's about 40% that goes to recycling and about 60% goes to creative reuse. And it's really just kind of a game of, it's, you know, we're not like a major recycler, like the people who take our plastic film and styrofoam are Orange Recycling in East Durham. And they are looking at huge markets and like what they can sell big bales of things for, because we're a really small business, you know, we're just kind of seeing what we can you know, move on a little bit of it's a bigger scale than what you would do, but it's smaller.
You have a question next to you.
Yeah.
So is there any kind of push or any way that we as consumers can push for things being packaged in one material? And my example is, over the past couple of years, I've decided to try to reduce the amount of plastic I consume. So I've started buying milk in cartons, but the cartons have a plastic spout. Like when I was a kid, I mean, most of us are old enough to remember the school milk thing.
Yeah.
You opened up, there was no plastic spout. It's like, you know, let's get rid of this. I mean, is there any effort to try to make these companies, when we have packaging that we have to have, it's not that we can reduce this, well, can we make it so it's friendlier to recycle?
Yeah, I think this is a really great example of like where there are many different actions you can take. So, you know, there are some people who are really good at letter writing campaigns and these kinds of things. And then there are some people who are like, no, I want to go straight to the legal, you know, let's see if there's a policy change that we can make at like the General Assembly level or the City Council level. Then there are people who are like, you know, I'm gonna, you know, boycott or do some, you know, so that there's a lot of different actions I think you can take. I think it kind of depends on who you are and where you are and like what your style is really. But I think, you know, in terms of the packaging, you look to what your closest proximity is in the consumer chain, right? So your grocery store or your co-op, this is how, like, you know, one of the reasons why I love shopping at the co-op or the farmer's market is because I have a greater chance of affecting who I'm buying from. So I was buying, gosh, it was not broccolini, it was something, and they were getting twined with twist ties, yes. And I just was like, hey, what if you just had a bin of these and I could just grab them? Like, would it really be that difficult for you to weigh them out? You know, because I want to get like 4 bunches of these every time I come. And, you know, collard greens really cook down. You know what you want? A lot of collard greens. And like the twist ties, it was like just driving me crazy. I was like, oh, or would you take them back? And so I like to think of like what the closest chain in the supply that I can affect. And then that farmer now comes to me and says, oh, I'm like buying clamshells for my berries or something like that. What should I do? And I'm like, say no more. I just collected 80 billion clamshells. You don't have to buy any. And so, you know, they've stopped that. So it's kind of like, you might have less luck with Harris Teeter, but you might be able to say, hey, Durham Co-op Market, can you please find a cream, you know, a milk, a creamer that has no plastic or something like that. And then, you know, the co-op is having the effect on the second tier supply chains, and then they get to have those conversations. And it really does, I've seen it make a difference, like at Fillory, she has these conversations with second and third tier supplies. Like when she makes her conditioner, she was getting it in these giant reusable drums, but they wouldn't take the drums back because of freight shipping. And she spent years trying to get it to happen, and finally it changed. And that was a huge, I mean, that's like a, you know, something that ships on a pallet. So yeah. I hope that answers your question.
I'm wondering if you've ever heard of Free the Ocean on a very small scale. That's how I'm making my contribution.
That's great.
It's there, every time you answer a trivia question, they remove certain pieces of plastic in the ocean.
Oh, cool.
And you can also order products from them that are very much like this. You can order shampoo that doesn't
Oh,
come
cool.
in a plastic thing. You can order laundry detergent that comes in paper
Mhm.
and just all kinds of things like that. And it's,
Comes every day.
Last question. We were in Ann Arbor, Michigan last week, and they still have bottle returned to the store for deposit.
Yeah.
And,
What's that?
yeah, yeah, and I know, and I remember when that went into effect, I think I was living in California, my friends were living there, and they're bikers. And so they loved it because they could bike and there were no broken bottles on the road, as opposed to what we see around here. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was gonna say my aunt, I mean, my in-laws, have, bottle return, and, in Maine, they live in Maine, and I was just up there for the total solar eclipse. And, my husband was drinking Guinness, which has that like weird thing, and I've just always assumed that means it's not a can that you can recycle, and I threw it in the trash. I know this would shock you. And my father-in-law or my mother-in-law was like, no, we get money for that. And it was really funny. And she opened her mudroom closet, and it was like 3 giant milk crates that were just full of, wine bottles. And she was like, I swear this is from a few months, like. Yeah. I wish we did that here. I mean, and you can see on all the cans, it has like the list of states and everything like that. And that's like, a thing that I really think Coca-Cola should take responsibility for their bottles and have bottle return. They should be the ones recycling it. HP does it with their printers. They take their cartridges back and they recycle them. And, they make new printer cartridges or, like more downgraded, less, plastic that needs less integrity kind of stuff. If a printer company could do that, then I think, we could get full account.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank Bryce so much for coming. Why don't we have a closing prayer and then we will have our evening before us. Let's pray. Creator God, we give you thanks for this green earth. We thank you, Lord, for people like Bryce who inspire and teach and show us grace and show us how to have grace with ourselves, but also give us tools and techniques for making a difference to your green earth. We pray that you will give us peaceful hearts with fervor and patience in urgency. In Christ Jesus' name we pray this.
Amen.
thank you for the song.
Taking
Yeah.
time.
All right.